Good evening. Tonight we are going to do an intro to the Bible study grounded in prayer. I know many of you have just gotten your books or possibly have not picked up your books yet. So I'm going to post the meat of the study tomorrow, giving you time to familiarize yourself with the book and go over the scriptures that I'm going to list off in this video for you to read and prepare. So first off, I want to look at the book. This is different than what we've done before. The participant and leader book are in one. So when you see things that are geared towards somebody leading the group, that's not where you're going to focus most of your attention. You're going to be looking at this book from the participant perspective. And some of the things that I really want you to focus in on. So for tomorrow night, we'll be starting on page 10. Noting the scriptures that are listed in the book, we will be going over those scriptures. We will use some of the discussion questions, so you can go ahead and take a look at those, but I might put a different spin on those. You can certainly read study notes and then the application. That's where we're going to focus our time and attention on. We also will probably get into this section that says after group. We will probably be using part of this as the lecture, so you can go ahead and read through the after group because that's actually probably going to be part of the lesson. And after we've done our first lesson, you can see that there are daily devotions. These are very short, something you can do along with your other daily devotions as a part of this study. And they list one of those for each day, scripture to read and something to reflect on. Then as you can see, we're on to the second part. So this is not going to be a book as meaty, we'll say, as the last study we did. A lot of the extra meat of the material will be coming to you in the lecture and the discussion I will be presenting to you. This is sort of a guide and a jumping off point for us and to help you kind of understand and see where we're going to be going with each lecture. So what we'll do each evening when I post and start out, obviously if we're going to do a study grounded in prayer, we're going to be opening with prayer. So I, of course, have all the prayer requests that are listed through our church email. But if you have other things that you want to be in prayer for, send me those. Message me those in email, text, Facebook Messenger, and we can include those in the lesson as we start the evening. And we're going to usually open up with a question. So I'll be posing a question, and that question is going to be sort of a thread throughout the lesson, something that we're going to be looking for and we're going to be basing our study of the scripture off of. And then this is where we're going to get into the meat of the text. So for tomorrow night, I have got a list of scriptures that I want you to read, and we are going to have a particular focus. The first focus that we're going to do with the Lord's Prayer is looking at that very first short line, Our Father. Our Father. What does that mean? How does it influence our prayer life? What and how should it influence our lives as disciples? And so that's going to kind of be the running thread for the first session, is the first line, Our Father, and then the descriptors of that line. Our Father, who art in heaven. Who art in heaven describes a characteristic of our Father. Hallowed be thy name. Another describing characteristic of our Father. So, as you look through these scriptures, I want you to kind of keep that in the forefront of your mind. So for tomorrow's lesson that we'll post, the main lecture, I want you to read Matthew chapter 6, 5 through 15. Matthew 6, 5 through 15. Then I want you to move on to Luke chapter 11, 1 through 13. Luke chapter 11, 1 through 13. Now, when you look at those, both places in the Gospels where the Lord's Prayer is presented to us, the first time that Jesus gives us this framework of how to pray, I want you to contrast the words. Now, the Lord's Prayer itself, that's going to be pretty much the same, but there are things that follow the prayer description that come right after it and are in that section and related to the Lord's Prayer itself. So notice what follows. Take note of that in Matthew. Take note of that in Luke. Take note of, are the messages that follow different? Are they the same? How did they inform us about the meaning of the Lord's Prayer? Especially for tomorrow night about God our Father. When you look at John, you're going to be looking at 1 John chapter 3, 1 through 2. 1 John chapter 3, 1 through 2. When you read that, think to yourself, how does this relate back to the Matthew text and the Luke text? Why have we chosen to read this text alongside those two for tonight's lesson? So what kind of descriptors does 1 John 3, 1 through 2 give us about our Father? How does it inform that phrase? And the last scripture I want you to focus on tonight is Galatians 4, verses 4 through 7. Galatians 4, 4 through 7. Now, this is going to get into the idea of adoption. So what we need to do when we read and study Galatians in the framework of talking about the Lord's Prayer is, how does this idea of adoption, being adopted into God's family, inform our understanding of what it means to open a prayer with God our Father? How does it inform this? So those are things that you can be doing tonight or tomorrow morning or whenever you are able to prepare for the next segment of this lesson. And after we work through all of those scriptures I have listed, if you have your books, that is when we are going to hit the additional study part. Now, we're going to look through these scriptures. We may or may not ask the exact questions that they have here, but this is more like a framework for us to jump from and use to help us start our discussion. And then, of course, we'll be joining in the daily devotions together. So, after Thursday's lesson post, our first lesson, and we get to next week, which will be post on a Wednesday, since everybody at that point will actually have your materials and understand, what we are doing. I will be drawing from those daily devotions and incorporating that into the lesson. So you will want to read those, think about them, ponder them, reflect on them, so that when we draw that back into the lesson, you understand the connections that we are making with the scripture. So I am excited to share in this study with you. We're going to do a very in-depth look at the Lord's Prayer. I know there's not a whole lot of meat in here, but that is because this is a jumping off point, which gives us many avenues to explore with breaking down the Lord's Prayer piece by piece and understanding that that's not just something we say as a tradition in worship, but this is a framework for prayer and is very influential in our lives as disciples and as followers of Jesus Christ. So I am looking forward to the study. Please remember, reach out to me with your prayer requests, and we will include those when we start the lecture. And I hope you have fun reading and thinking and preparing to break down God our Father. So I will see you tomorrow in our first study and lecture.